My name is Captain Tom Daniels. I'm 38 years old, served 15 of those years in the U.S. Army, and most of them were overseas. Afghanistan, Iraq, a few posts I still don't talk about out loud. I've seen enough sand, smoke, and silence to last me a few lifetimes, and somewhere along the way I stopped flinching at much. These days I'm stationed stateside at Fort Sterling, a mid-sized base tucked between pine trees and routine. It's quieter here, cleaner too. The pace is different, more emails than explosions, but there's a rhythm to it that suits me. I run logistics now. Gear in, gear out, keep the supply chain flowing, and the young ones from misplacing half their rations. Most of my team is solid. No drama, just men and women who know their jobs and do them. Until about 6 months ago, when Lieutenant Brooke Carter got transferred in from a coastal intelligence post. She walked in sharp, polished, like someone who had read every manual twice and was taking notes during lunch breaks. Smart, sure, but something about her felt calculated. You know the type, the kind who smiles with her mouth but not her eyes. At first, I thought she was just eager, new to base, wanted to impress. But there was something in the way she hovered, watching too closely, asking too many questions that didn't need answers. I didn't have a name for it then. I do now. But back then, all I had was a twitch in the back of my mind, the kind that says trouble doesn't always announce itself with noise. It wasn't much at first. A pause too long when I handed off reports. Her desk was always a little too clean, like she was preparing for an inspection that never came. I've made it through firefights with fewer nerves than I felt the first time I caught her watching what drawer I kept my notebooks in. I didn't know it then, but something was starting. Something small, quiet, and built for war. It started with little things, subtle changes in the air that you wouldn't notice unless you were paying close attention. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it, that years of watching my six had made me overly cautious, even in a place as structured as Fort Sterling. Brooke began inserting herself into tasks that didn't fall under her lane. Logistics isn't exactly a glamorous department, but suddenly she had a reason to be in our data systems, pulling old files, cross-checking supply receipts with timestamps I hadn't touched in months. One day, she flagged a line in my report as incomplete. It wasn't. She had just changed the formatting in the spreadsheet, then questioned why the numbers looked off. It wasn't a mistake, it was bait. And it worked. I spent a full morning combing through inventory codes, trying to prove I hadn't screwed up. After I cleared it, she sent a polite email to our commanding officer, noting her appreciation for my quick corrections. The tone was professional, the message wasn't. Then came the questions. Always in public. Always with that same tone, like she was clarifying something for the good of the team. During one debrief, she asked if I had confirmed the Humvee maintenance logs with TechOps, even though it was literally her task that week. She smiled the whole time, like it was just a helpful nudge. But she knew what she was doing. That question wasn't for me. It was for everyone else in the room. She was planting seeds. Doubt doesn't need evidence, just repetition. The more she asked, the more it looked like I didn't have answers. A pause here, a correction there. Suddenly, I wasn't just Captain Daniels anymore. I was the guy who missed a fuel report, the guy who had to revise equipment tallies twice in 1 month. And then came the rumors. I don't know who started them, but I knew where they were growing. Someone said my paperwork had triggered a quiet audit. Another said I was being reviewed for inconsistency. None of it is official, nothing on the books. But eyes started following me longer when I walked into ops. Conversations shifted when I passed through the mess hall. I've operated under pressure before, but this wasn't combat. This was something colder, something procedural. It's hard to defend yourself when you're not even sure what you're being accused of. One afternoon, I caught Brooke standing near my locker. She said she was looking for a misdelivered package. I nodded, said nothing, and watched her walk away with that same crisp posture, like everything about her was rehearsed. That night, I checked my logs and found that one of my outgoing shipments had been held back by the admin. No explanation, no email, just marked for review. I stared at the screen for a long time, and that's when it clicked. She wasn't trying to catch a mistake, she was trying to create one. I stopped sleeping well after that. Started noticing how often she walked past my desk, how her questions always landed the day after I submitted my reports. There was a rhythm to it, a trap in slow motion. Still, I didn't react. I kept my tone even, my numbers clean. But something inside me shifted. I wasn't just doing my job anymore, I was defending it. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was part of a unit, I felt hunted. I was still peeling off my boots when I saw them. 2 MPs standing just inside my barracks room, gloves on, clipboards out, like they were grading a science fair project I hadn't signed up for. One of them was flipping through my top drawer like he expected to find state secrets under my socks. I didn't say a word, just leaned against the doorframe and watched. It was a strange thing realizing your space has been invaded and feeling nothing. Not fear, not anger, just a kind of slow, measured curiosity. Like watching a neighbor mow your lawn without asking and wondering if it would be rude to stop him. I cleared my throat gently, just enough for them to notice. The shorter one stiffened, looked up, and said it was a routine inspection. Standard protocol, nothing personal. That's when I knew it was very personal. See, you don't get random inspections after 15 years of clean files and tight reports. You get them when someone wants to make a point. I gave a polite nod, stepped aside to let them finish their little show. My gear was neatly stacked, nothing out of place. A photo of my sister at graduation sat on the corner shelf, exactly where it had been for the last 2 years. They moved slowly, too slow, as if they were waiting for me to panic, but I didn't. I just sat on the edge of my bunk, grabbed a protein bar from my bag, and took a bite. If they were expecting fireworks, they were going to be disappointed. I didn't ask who sent them, didn't need to. There's a certain scent that comes with manufactured suspicion. I'd been smelling it for weeks. And now, it had walked through my door wearing regulation boots and a nameplate I didn't recognize. Let them search. Let them wonder. I had nothing to hide. At least, not the kind of thing they were looking for. The shorter MP pulled open my second drawer and paused. He lifted the small black notebook I kept there, held it as it might bite. I looked up from my protein bar, nodded once, and said they could read it if they wanted. He glanced at his partner, then opened the cover. The taller one stepped closer, both of them now hunched slightly over the pages. I watched their faces shift as they scanned the first few lines. Not suspicion, not triumph, just confusion. They flipped another page, then another. Their eyes stopped moving fast. The room got quieter. The kind of quiet that sneaks in when someone realizes they were expecting one thing and found something else entirely. Each page had a date, a name, a sentence or two, nothing dramatic, just quiet observations. Corporal Jensen stayed late to fix the comms board. Sergeant Ruiz covered my 0600 so I could call my mom for her birthday. Alvarez handed me a fresh canteen before the range. They didn't say anything for a while, just turned pages. Page after page of moments no one else would remember unless they were written down. The taller one finally looked up, like he wanted to ask something but couldn't quite shape the words. I stayed quiet, just nodded again. Yeah, that's what it is. Just my version of the truth. This wasn't a ledger of mistakes. It wasn't a list of grievances or a catalog of excuses. It was proof of something softer, something harder to fake, that we still noticed each other. That even in a place run by orders and hierarchy, kindness didn't disappear. It just stayed quiet. And maybe that's why I let them read it. Because in that moment, it wasn't evidence. It was a mirror. And you can't accuse a mirror of lying. There's a page in that notebook where I wrote down how Private Lopez gave me half his protein bar during a late shift, even though he only had one. It wasn't because I was hungry. He just said I looked like I hadn't eaten, and that was enough for him. There wasn't a lesson in it, just a quiet kind of noticing. Another page lists how Sergeant Kim fixed the overhead light above my cot when it started flickering. He didn't log a ticket or make a fuss. Just came by after chow and had it sorted before I finished folding laundry. I jotted down a morning when Staff Sergeant Parker handed me a spare poncho during a surprise downpour. He didn't say a word, just dropped it on my pack with a nod before heading to the range. That entry ended with 2 words: stayed dry. Corporal Diaz once gave up his weekend leave so his buddy could go see his newborn daughter. I didn't even hear it from him. Someone else mentioned it in passing while we loaded gear. That day, I wrote, "Sacrifice doesn't always make noise." One of my favorite entries came after Private Hernandez fixed a broken chair in the common area. He didn't ask anyone, just grabbed tools and patched it up so no one else would fall through the thing again. I wrote, "Quiet fix, big impact." Sometimes it was smaller than that, like when Jenkins offered his last clean towel without hesitation, or when Lieutenant Blake brought back a second coffee from the PX, handed it to me without saying who it was for. There was no expectation, just a moment of thoughtfulness, caught before it vanished. Reading back through the pages, a pattern forms. It's not the loudest voices or the shiniest reports that shape this place. It's the invisible glue of daily decency. These little acts that no one claps for, that don't show up in commendations or after-action reviews, but hold everything together just the same. Not one of these gestures made anyone a hero, but they built something real. A web of small kindnesses that made life more livable, even in a place designed for structure and steel. That's what the notebook holds. A record not of perfection, but of presence. People showing up for each other in the simplest ways. And over time, that became the most honest thing I had. They kept turning the pages. First slowly, then with something sharper in their eyes. Page after page filled with simple names and small kindnesses, and then it hit them. Or maybe it hit all of us at the same time. Her name was nowhere. Not once. Not a scribble, not a footnote in the corner of a rushed entry. Brooke Carter didn't exist in this record. A place where even the smallest gestures were caught like falling leaves. She was pure absence. It wasn't loud, it wasn't pointed, but the silence around her name screamed. One of the officers paused halfway through a sentence he'd been reading aloud. He looked at me, then at his partner. The room was still. The second officer cleared his throat like he might say something, but didn't. They didn't need to. The weight of what they hadn't found was louder than anything written in ink. It was then that I realized something. This notebook, which I'd once started just to hold on to the good parts of my day, had become a mirror. It didn't accuse, it didn't defend, it just reflected. And Brooke had managed to leave no trace in a place where everyone else had left fingerprints of decency. I saw it in their posture, in the way their energy changed, no longer inspecting, no longer clinical. They were reading a truth that couldn't be faked or fabricated, not through spreadsheets, not through formal complaints, just through the steady presence or absence of decency. The taller officer finally shut the notebook, fingers resting on the cover like it was something sacred. He didn't speak, but the line of his jaw said enough. What you don't do says just as much as what you do. And in this case, what Brooke hadn't done was everything. I found out later that Brooke had been making her rounds like a political candidate with a secret agenda, whispering near the coffee urn, dropping vague comments in the weight room, asking people if they ever thought it was strange that I wrote things down every day. She called it surveillance, said it was a little obsessive, maybe even dangerous. Someone told me she used the phrase internal intelligence, like I was the Pentagon in disguise, but instead of suspicion, it sparked something else. Jenkins laughed so hard he dropped his protein shaker. He said if I was a spy, I was the worst one he'd ever met. Couldn't even keep my own boots clean half the time. And just like that, something shifted. The story she was trying to spin never stuck. People didn't turn away. They leaned in. Not out of loyalty to me, but because, for the first time in a while, they felt seen. Private Bell started keeping his own notes, called it his good vibes log, drew a lightning bolt on the cover for dramatic effect. Staff Sergeant Ruiz taped a sticky note to the whiteboard in the briefing room, said today's win. Alvarez didn't yell when the printer jammed. The air lightened. Smiles got a little easier. Someone brought in donuts and labeled the box with a note for the unrecognized heroes. The next day, someone else left protein bars with the words "pass it on." It wasn't some grand movement, just small ripples that started reaching beyond my little notebook. People started sharing when they saw something good, even the gruff ones, even the tired ones. I'd find scribbled notes left on my bunk. "Great call on the shift schedule. Thanks for keeping calm during the mix-up." It wasn't performative, it was personal, real. And Brooke? She was still trying. She walked into the mess like she hadn't just accused half the unit of being part of some quiet conspiracy. She smiled too widely, complimented Jenkins on his shoelaces, told Alvarez he had an efficient typing style. It was like watching someone try to clap with one hand. It didn't work, not because people were cold, but because they weren't buying it anymore. Sincerity had a new scent in the room, and her version didn't match. Even Lieutenant Bowman, who never says anything unless it's in a report, told me one afternoon that he'd started noting one good moment a day. Said it helped him sleep. That's when I realized the fallout wasn't mine. It was hers. The notebook had started as a survival tactic, something to hold onto when the ground kept shifting. But it turned out to be a map, one that led the whole unit somewhere better. I didn't win anything. There was no medal, no memo, no special meeting. But the silence around me had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It hummed. It held something new. And Brooke, for all her planning, couldn't control what happens when people decide to care out loud. It came without fanfare. No ceremony, no formal announcement. Just a quiet word from the base commander one morning after drills. He said the leadership had been watching, not the reports or the chatter, but the current that moved through the unit. And they'd seen where it flowed from. They offered me the role of head training officer, said it was more than tactics and schedules, said it was about shaping the kind of team people wanted to stay in. I nodded, accepted, and went back to work like nothing had changed. But inside, something settled. It wasn't a win over anyone. It wasn't about Brooke or what she tried to do. It was the base recognizing a value that couldn't be measured in policy checkboxes. The kind of respect that grows quietly but steadily, like roots under a strong foundation. Brooke didn't speak to me again. Within a week, she was reassigned. Admin role. A policy division tucked in the far end of headquarters. No field time, no team briefings. Just her and her spreadsheets. I heard she requested it. Said she wanted more structure, less chaos. No one cheered. No one gloated. It wasn't that kind of outcome. But people noticed. Her absence didn't leave a hole, it left clarity, like a fog that finally lifted. We got our rhythm back, our jokes, our trust. And me? I kept writing, not out of habit, but out of choice. 3 things a day, always. Because the notebook never needed to change the world. It just needed to hold a mirror up to the parts of it that were worth keeping. Turns out, decency doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs consistency. It lasts longer than ambition, speaks louder than accusation, and when it matters most, it rises. Quiet, steady, undeniable. I still write in the journal, not to prove anything, not to fight anyone, just to remind myself what's worth noticing. 3 good things before I call it a day. Some are simple, a door held open, a laugh shared, a task finished with no fuss. Others stay with me longer, like quiet proof that good people keep showing up. I don't write names to track them. I don't tally gestures. I just let them land where they will. Because it's not about what others see, it's about what I choose to carry with me. What I decide matters. Some victories aren't loud. They don't need applause. They just keep breathing quietly in the background, steady and real. That's what this has become. A small, constant thing. The kind that holds its shape when everything else gets noisy. The kind that tells you who you are without ever raising its voice.